Another day, another mousepad video. Today we're going to be having a look at the following pads. There are definitely a lot of new releases in here that a lot of you have been asking me to check out, and today I finally get the chance to do so. Before we do that, I wanted to mention that all of these pads were actually sent out to me, and of course that will drastically affect my opinion on these pads, and I will be shilling them all. I would also truly appreciate if you could hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in any of these types of reviews, as there are gonna be a lot more coming. Starting with the CRUCIBLE from PADSMITH. This pad is very interesting because it is an actual weave and not a knitted pad, which means that these threads are kind of three-dimensional instead of just being a 2D knitting. Of course, the artwork is also absolutely stunning because the artist called Conrady is simply absolutely amazing at what he does. But before we go deeper into this surface, I do want to talk about the stitching first. It is ever so slightly below the surface, and the base is an alpha cell base, which is insanely similar to another pad that we have coming up later in this video. This pad will never be able to slip on your desk. It is super sticky, and the base is also very firm. It is almost an artisan mid type of firm, so the overall experience is very consistent. However, there is something about this pad that is also very unique, and that is that some of these threads are kind of reflective. So on some mice, like the Vaxi mice for example, I'm having pretty bad tracking issues on this pad. I've tried a lot of different types of mice on this thing, and the only mouse that really didn't work too well were the Maxi mice, and other than that I personally haven't had any tracking issues. The pad feels like it has like these slight bumps that you can also see visually here on the pad itself. Wherever you see a slight bump here on the pad itself, you also feel it. It is very subtle though, nothing like a Heian whatsoever. In terms of the overall speed, I would probably consider this being a speed pad because it is so firm, and also because of that bumpy texture. It kind of reminds me the way that CorePad air skates work, that you have less friction on your skates themselves. So when lightly swiping across the mouse pad with large pad skates, it has this almost hovery feeling of a speed pad, but it's definitely not that fast. I will say that the feeling of the pad itself is very foreign. It is not comparable to that many pads out there, and that is also why I don't really like using it personally. It is just a bit too unique to the point where I don't really feel this being too familiar. In terms of the speed inside of the Artisan family, this best compares to the Hayate Atsu that I have here on my desk now. In terms of friction, they feel pretty similar, but there's just something that makes this surface weird. I assume it's these bumps inside of the weave that feel a bit hard that are kind of throwing me off here comparing it to other cloth pads, and that is also why it's very difficult to compare this to anything else out there. But yeah, in terms of overall speed, pretty similar, but the CRUCIBLE is this kind of almost weird combination of speed and also control because of those different types of fabrics being used inside of the same weave here. Other than that, I won't be comparing it to any other pads out there because this is simply that unique, and because you simply expect every mouse pad out there to be flat boxed. This is flat boxed as well, and so are all of the other pads in here. So if I ever forget to mention if it is actually flat packed or not, just assume that it is. And the second PADSMITH pad that we're checking out today is the Temple of Dreams Remastered. This is definitely a control pad, and it is not a balance control pad or a speedy control pad or anything like that. This is just a real control pad. For me personally, this is definitely too slow, but before we get into any comparisons, I want to talk about everything else here. The stitching is level to surface. It is a polyurethane base, which is very firm. It is overall a very consistent experience because of that, and the embossings on the base of the pad look really fucking sick, and yet again it is shipped flat. I also do want to mention that this one is actually on sale for 25% off over on padsmith.com, but I guess it's about time we get into some comparisons. Comparing it directly here to my brand new Zero Soft, I definitely do think that the Todd Remaster is still slower than it. It is a very slight difference, especially compared to the old Todd, which was insanely slow. So this one is no longer a almost mud pad, but just a more average control pad. I do think that the Zero sits at the top end of the spectrum when it comes to control pads in terms of the speed, so this one would sit right in the center of that spectrum. For me personally, this pad is simply too slow and I don't really enjoy using it, but if you're looking for a real control pad with a awesome design and a super consistent firm base, this is definitely the pad for you, especially at 25% off right now. Another pad that a lot of people have been talking about is the GECKO. I have had this pad for several months already. It is a square size pad at 490 by 490, and it spots a alpha cell base with just raw alpha cell. This has no pattern on it. They didn't do anything to it, and that is why this thing is insanely sticky. Sticky to the point where Stubby actually dragged his car across the road with it. The stitching sits between being either level to surface or slightly above the surface, and the base is incredibly firm. It is almost as firm as a freefall pad, which was actually a silicone mold. In terms of the actual texture, the pad feels a lot like the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn, which I have here. It almost feels like a different revision of it. The overall pad itself is of course incredibly firm compared to a Saturn Pro, which spots a poron base, but in terms of the gliding experience, it is also pretty darn similar, and these surfaces do feel very familiar. I think that this pad sits between being a control and a balance pad. It's just that the base is insanely firm, which does kind of make the surface faster. So the best comparison here would actually be the normal Saturn, which is not a Pro version, which I have right here. These pads are super similar because this normal Saturn version over the Pro version also feels slightly faster. So swapping between these two gives me a feeling that these are almost the same surfaces. They feel insanely similar. So if you're looking for that pad that kind of sits between being a control and a balance pad with a super smooth surface that is very comfortable to play on, I can definitely recommend the GECKO. It also comes default at a 500 by 500 size, and it is a pretty darn decent black square. However, I do think that this pad is incredibly boring. It is just uninspiring, boring, and just a black square. But if that's what you're looking for, or that simply doesn't matter to you, this pad is freaking great. And you know what's also great? Having a Discord server where you can hang out with all of your peripheral friends. If you're at all into audio, keyboards, mouse pads, mice, modding, 3D printing even, we have a space for you, and that is pericord.com. You will find me and Stubby talking in there in the voice chat all the time, and if you simply want a community to talk with your friends and all other people in the enthusiast space, and also make new friends and play games together, definitely go check out our Discord server, Pericord. I'll make sure to link it down in the description below, or you can simply type in pericord.com. But next up, we have the AKKO Control Pro from X-RAYPAD. This pad was actually super controversial when it first got released because the square version was almost $85 or something similar to that, but they have since adjusted their pricing accordingly, and they also offer this new 490 by 420 version that I actually gaslighted them into doing. Their new packaging that they have made for this pad that I'm showing to you now on screen is also insanely good, and is actually probably the best looking packaging I've ever seen for outer boxings. I'm just overall very impressed by what X-RAYPAD have done with this pad. Not only did they adjust their sizings to our community, come up with a awesome cardboard packaging, but also do they provide this exact surface with custom designs, so you can put on anything on this pad. Just how I hosted a design competition and this design won. It was funny at first, but this has just been hanging on my wall for the past few months. But as you can see, they offer this in a square size and also 490 by 420, as I already mentioned, and it spots an almost identical alpha cell base to this PADSMITH pad that we've been talking about, which is the Crucible, and it also has the same pattern underneath. This pad is yet again very firm, just like almost any other pad these days for whatever reason, so this will also be yet again super consistent, and the stitching is also level to surface, and it has never annoyed me in game. Also, it is about 3.5 millimeters thin, so this will basically be impossible to annoy you, and I personally love this pad. And you know why? It's because it's just a better Hien. It is not as abrasive, it just feels more consistent, especially because of that firmer base. It never slips on your desk whatsoever, and compared to my Hien, it is just a joy to use. X-RAYPAD actually called this a speed pad, but I would definitely not consider this being a speed pad. This is much more of a balance pad that just sits in the center of the spectrum, just like the Hien does, because it is not a real speed pad. So if you're gonna go check it out, definitely make sure to use code jakeu over at the checkout. And the very last pad that we're gonna check out today is the new SOKU KAIZEN Pro. This one yet again comes flat boxed. It spots a PU base, which again is pretty firm. Not as firm as some of the other pads that we've checked out this video, but also definitely not a soft. I would say that this sits in between a artisan mid and soft, which just provides this very consistent experience. The colors of the artwork are freaking awesome, but I personally really hate the face of this fucking design and also the shoes. And when Yuda called this an NFT design, that was just the perfect fit. This pad is pretty boring. It is just a smooth balance pad, which is nothing special yet again. I definitely wouldn't call this a control pad. I would more so call it a balance pad, because when I use it with my Viper Race 3 Pro skates here, it's definitely too fast to be a control pad. The pad doesn't really remind me of anything specific in the scene right now, but if I absolutely had to make a comparison, I would probably do it with the Infinity Shogun. The mid base over here on the Shogun is very similar. The surface itself is also sort of similar, but the Infinity Control V2 Bluetooth feels much more smooth compared to this one, even though this one is also considered being smooth. And yeah, that's just really about it. It's just a mouse pad. It's not bad whatsoever, but it is definitely a mouse pad. On my Shogun, I definitely do feel that I have some control when gliding across it. And on the KAIZEN, it feels sort of similar, but ever so slightly faster. And if you couldn't already tell, yes, I'm getting very tired of comparing mouse pads. But yeah, if you're simply looking for that slower balance pad, almost control pad type beat, this could definitely be a pad for you. But I personally can't see myself ever using this again because it just looks like an NFT design. I do absolutely love the colors though, especially because I'm a big purple fan, but that's really about it. Because the pad is around 3.5mm thin, it has never annoyed me with the edge in game whatsoever. And the pad of course absolutely works. That's really about it. I would truly appreciate if you could hit that subscribe button and also the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in peripheral enthusiast reviews, because there are a lot more coming. But for now, I am absolutely done with talking about mouse pads, and I can't wait to check out some mice for you guys in the very near future. Until then, I'll see you guys very soon. Peace out.